Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about Path of Exile 2 is Ruthless by Kripparrian. I'm going to be giving my own thoughts on this and reacting, mainly because the last video I made was a review by myself, and most of the comments were pretty negative. I had a lot of comments agree and say, actually, this is a very, very valid take, and I had a lot of comments been like, who are you? You're not good at the game. You don't know what you're doing. Skill issue. Your build's bad. You don't know how to play the game. And I find that very amusing because just because I don't have a name attached to Path of Exile doesn't mean I don't know what I'm doing on the game. In fact, I pretty much am a POE geek. I know exactly what I'm doing on the game. I've done everything in the game. And I do have some legit concerns about POE2. It doesn't mean that I don't think the game is enjoyable. It doesn't mean I don't think the game can be good. But I think in its current form, it's actually not good as an ARPG in the sense of what we want a typical ARPG to be. And strangely, Kripparrian here in this review is going to kind of agree. And one of the main points before we begin the video is this. And this is why I respect Krip, because he can be honest, you know, he's not shilling out. One of the things he says right at the end of the video is in Path of Exile 1, one of the most difficult things is when you looked at an item, you had to envisage how the item could be crafted and therefore value it based on potential crafting possibility. That is something that comes over a long period of time of understanding how all the systems interact. And it's something I became good at and knowledgeable about. And he says in POE 1, that's just not the case anymore. The item is either basically good or bad, which does mean finding items is an improvement, and I agree. Checking vendors is more useful than in POE 1. However, it's very linear. It's either this item is good or this item is bad, discard. And I don't like that. I like being able to think about how the tools interact and how potential begins. So what I mean by this, and I'm just going to talk because, you know, you see a pair of gloves that have a temple mod, damage when shocked. I know I could potentially harvest res swap them to become fire. So it'll be damage on ignite, or you could have, you know, the cold mod. I could maybe wipe suffixes. I could use a beast to make the meta mod cheaper. I might be able to block and slam. I might be able to augment from harvest. I might be able to target a null with an Eldritch suffix, or, you know what I mean? An Eldritch null might be able to target a suffix and blah, blah, blah. And I can see, this item that's dropped on the floor, people are going to discard it. But actually, this is a good item. In POE 1, it's very much just, this is either good or bad. There's a lot of depth that's been removed in the aim of simplicity. We're going to get into the review, but I really think this is a good video, and it's nice that it's a big content creator saying it, because unfortunately in PoE, unless you have a name or you're, you know, vetted by the community, people don't really respect your opinion, even though the game is made up of majority nobodies, and the streamers are the outliers. But let's begin. I just wanted to get that out of the way, that I think this is a really solid video.
Almost a week, but I have been playing like 14 plus hours a day, and I have been near the top of the ladder, so I have been playing quite efficiently. So basically, I'm at the point right now where most people start to approach in, like, you know, a few weeks time, depending on how much time you know, you might have to dedicate to the game. And I want to give you guys my opinion of things. And you might not agree with some things. You know, there's a game out there for everyone. And I think my opinion is valuable, at least because while you might have your own take on the game, you might be having a lot of fun right now. But yeah, I can kind of tell you how probably you will feel in some time, in a week.
See, this is what I like about Krip, right? And it's honest. And this is what I try to tell people, that at the moment, if you've not played much PoE, you haven't got 10k hours in PoE 1, you haven't absolutely no life the game, and you've just joined into PoE 2, and you're making your way through Act 1, 2, or 3, and you're rotating through all the skills, and you're dodging all of the bosses, it's going to feel good. It's going to feel nice. Yesterday I re-rolled, and I played a crossbow with ice, and I was freezing packs of enemies with the ice crossbow, and it felt great. I didn't have any complaints for the game. But the more and more and more you play the game, you will begin to notice a few things that eventually I believe will grate on the community. Let's let this roll.
Time, in 2 weeks' time, whatever. That's just kind of how these things work when you have people like me who just play every waking hour of the day, all day when the game comes out. So, as you have seen the title of the video, Path of Exile 2 is Ruthless. This is not like describing Path of Exile 2, though I guess it could describe Path of Exile 2. It is actually literal. Ruthless is a game mode in Path of Exile 1.
So when you come out and you tell people, hey, listen, Path of Exile 1 Ruthless mode wasn't actually that enjoyed. It was no movement skills, very, very rare drops. It wasn't super popular. Some people there was a core fan base that enjoyed it. But if you were to tell people, go and play Ruthless, they would freak out. However, now we have Kripparrian, who's played all of the game modes to a higher level and for a long period of time, also agreeing that this is Ruthless. This is the beta. The Ruthless POE1 was the beta for POE2, whether you like it or not. And the game is very, very different. They are two totally separate games. They should be judged independently because they are two. POE1 is not POE2. And when people in my video were asking, oh, you just want it to be POE1? Absolutely not. I actually think POE1 got pretty silly with the amount of mods and the amount of it just got a mess, right? It was just over bloated with a load of stuff. But that doesn't mean I can't critique POE2. And it is Ruthless in the sense of everything that the POE1 game mode was.
And in my opinion, the Ruthless game mode in Path of Exile 1 has been the pre-alpha test for Path of Exile 2. The concepts behind everything, the concepts behind scarcity, it is like the same thing. And again, I want you guys to understand this is not like an ignorant opinion. Ruthless is what I've mostly been playing in Path of Exile 1 since Path of Exile 1 added Ruthless to its game mode list. I have leveled many characters past 90, and level 90 in Ruthless is about equivalent to level 100 outside of Ruthless, so it is quite a task. And I really liked Ruthless, and for a lot of the reasons why I really like Ruthless, I quite like Path of Exile 2, but as you will see in today's video, there are certainly some issues that make it a little bit less fun. But it is pretty surprising to me because I know a lot of people have been hyped for Path of Exile 2. A lot of people who played Path of Exile 1, they were kind of ridiculing Ruthless about how stupid of a game mode it is. And now they're basically playing the graphical and mechanical update to Ruthless. And everyone's having so much fun. How about...
So here's the thing. This is interesting. Like he says, at the moment, you're enjoying it because it's a new experience. It's like a new league. It's like a new game mode. You enjoy it. But the more and more you play it, I think you're going to realize a few things. And Krip has he's made enough money to be shill free, shall we say. And he could chill out here. He's a big component of why GGG even survived. He invented the league system pretty much. But he's still honest, and that's why I respect Krip a lot. And here he is saying the same things that I'm trying to voice. It doesn't mean that the game is bad if you critique it. It doesn't mean that you think the game is trash. It doesn't mean that you want to go back to POE1. But this is Ruthless, and the systems he's going to talk about and the end game mapping, I think a lot of people need to kind of wake up and realize that the experience you're having from the campaign to maps isn't really PoE, okay? It's when you get into those higher tier maps, you'll begin to realize that actually this game probably isn't the game that you imagined, and pretty much all of your characters will be bricked. You're probably going to say, oh, you're just bad at building the characters. No, like we'll let the video roll, but I think people are unaware just how brutal the game is, and that doesn't just mean get good. It means that actually there's some fundamental problems with how the game is currently designed, and we'll let the tape roll.
I think Ruthless is fantastic in Path of Exile 1. I think people were overly dismissive about it, but the things that exist in Ruthless and Path of Exile 1 that people who typically play Path of Exile 1 didn't really like that much certainly are there, and honestly, to a higher degree in Path of Exile 2. So I think Path of Exile 2 may appeal to a new Path of Exile gamer, but I think a lot of people who really enjoy Path of Exile 1 may or may not like Path of Exile 2 in how the game is currently set up.
So there we have it. You know, we have Kripparrian there, played all the games, all the game modes. He's pretty much putting it out there on paper that he believes that people that really, really enjoy POE1 probably, more than likely, are not going to like POE2. Now, is that because this guy is unskilled? Is this because this guy is stupid? No. That's what people were pointing out in my comments. It's not. It doesn't mean that you're daft or you want the game to be POE1. It's just a statement. I truly believe that POE2 is entirely different to POE1. And like he says, it's probably going to find its own fan base. If it changes, if it gets tweaked, okay, maybe POE1 players come back to it. However, it's when you get to the tier 7 maps, the tier 8 maps, you get to these higher tier maps, you will be one shot over and over and over again and lose days of your time, and your character won't feel much stronger because the passive tree doesn't really have any power on it. You're probably going to say that's stupid. You know, you just don't know what you're doing. Again, Kripparrian agrees that the tree here in the game is very lackluster and kind of hinders a lot of stuff. So we'll let this play on.
Okay. But overall, I think Path of Exile 2 is a pretty good game. So you might be thinking, why is it like Ruthless? I just gave you a few examples here. I hope you guys have been enjoying the music. It's nice. Polish in the game is really, really good. Okay. Generally, it's like, you know, if you want to actually get, you know, high tier maps, you have to literally fully invest in high tier maps. If you want meaningful rewards from some of these, like league mechanics, you have to fully invest in them. If you just do them a little bit, they honestly feel like a waste of time. The game is filled with just real danger. It's super slow. It's super sluggish. This is the best movement skill that I have, and if you hit any object or a monster, you're stopped in your tracks, and it has a cooldown, and it has a lot of other limitations, so it is very much ruthless. It is.
So this game is on a supposed 3-month cycle with its leagues, and it's going to take you a vast, insane amount of time to reach higher tier maps if your build can even get there, because there are only certain builds that will be able to get to these higher tier maps and complete them. This isn't PoE1 where you will just load in and your build will do the tier 10 to tier Guardian maps, right? Most builds will be bricked. You won't even get to the higher tier maps. But even if you do get to the higher tier maps, it is a choice. So you're going to have to think, right, am I going to spend my Atlas points investing into sustain? We'll do that. We'll run all of the maps. Okay, now I want to do breach. I'm coming out of the sustain and I'm running breach, and you're not going to be doing multiple things at once. They want to slow the game down. They want you to have choice. They want you to say, hey, this evening I'm doing breach. They don't want 20 different things going on at once. That's the thing that I'm taking away from this. And so, yeah, you want high tier maps. You're going to have to run all of your maps, get the high tier map. If you die, it's 15% XP loss, which is an incredible amount. You're going to brick the map. The map's going to go. Your watchtowers are going to go. You're going to have to then go back to lower tier maps. You're going to have to start again. You're not going to get any XP because you're in a lower tier map. And you can end up hard stuck in the game because your character isn't good enough. And then you're kind of struggling to find gear because the good gear is in high tier maps. It's not like low tier maps have good gear and high tier maps have kind of similar, like in PoE1. Like, you can find an amazing item in a tier 5 map. A tier 16 map, you can find a pretty similar item. Maybe it's 70 life instead of 65. But in this game, the tiering system changes a lot, and you can get hard bricked, and I feel like people haven't quite reached that level yet, so they're still in the euphoria stage of trying different classes and running through the campaign. But we all know that ARPGs, especially PoE2, PoE1, is about the end game. That's what keeps you playing, right? You want to finish your character in a ARPG, because you're like, now I get access to the end game, now I get all of the power, we're going to see it ramp up. You're not going to feel much ramp in this game. Your character isn't going to drastically transform from level 50 to level 70. And I think people are going to probably wake up to that very soon.
Also very unforgiving. The amount you have to invest to make a character work, to go through a boss, can be daunting, and honestly, it's not that fair either. Like, you see my character now, I have like 3,000 health with, like, honestly an absurd amount of damage reduction mechanics, more than I've seen on any other character. And I mean, you still get one shot. Like this character, high level maps, literally you're getting one-shotted all the time. The main difference from Path of Exile 2 and Ruthless is actually the dodge roll.
Sorry to keep pausing, but it's interesting because we'll have content creators like Asmongold. They'll put up a video that will get 1 million views. And one of the most hyped up things was that he enjoys POE2 more because he's finally not been one-shot. You know, the game is finally fixed. That you can have 2k life and capped resistances, and he was like, I've not been one-shot yet. When you get to the end game and you get to the higher tier maps, like Krip says, 3k life, tons of damage reduction, which is just not going to be possible on most builds. He's still been relentlessly one-shot. Now, are you going to say that Kripparrian is a bad player, that Kripparrian doesn't know how to build and he doesn't know what he's doing? No, of course not. He's a very, very good player, and he's very logical and solid with his builds. So he is being relentlessly one-shot, and his time is being wasted. And in his own words, it's not very fun. The big thing that I anticipated coming into POE2, and I made this video years ago, was when they announced that there was going to be a dodge roll, people got excited because they're thinking, we're going to have all these movement skills, and then if I want to throw in a roll, I'll throw in a roll. All I could think was, every character has a dodge roll. What this now means is it's required. And there's going to be content and bosses made that literally requires you to roll. So when you come in from an evening of work, you're going to face a boss that no matter how strong your character is, if you mistime your dodge roll, you're dead. It's not bad build, it's not anything, it's you mistimed your dodge roll, you're dead, like Dark Souls. Now, to some people that will sound really cool. But when you've played a character for like 200 hours and you're still relying on, if I mistime my dodge roll, I am going to die and lose hours and hours and hours and hours of my experience and time and materials, it will grate on you. You won't want to make another character, because sometimes in PoE you think to yourself, yeah, this character's a little bit squishy, this can be my DPS guy, I'm going to go make a tank guy. You're probably going to have one character in PoE2, and it's more of a game that is, hey, I've completed it, as opposed to I'm going to make 10 different characters and experience the game, in my opinion.
Dodge roll seems to be something they've balanced the game around, and honestly, I don't like it that much. I don't like the dodge roll that much in general, and I don't like the fact that they're balancing the game around it. So what do I mean by, how are they balancing the game around it, Krip? Well, in Path of Exile 1, if you want to really tank a character, you can make one. If you want to make a character that survives the highest damage ability in the game, you can do that. You're going to have crappy damage, it's going to have other disadvantages, but you can do that. In Path of Exile 2, you can't really do that. You can invest in as much health and as much survivability as possible, and you can get nearly one-tapped by a near max level map, granted, but like I did an expedition the other day, and I got killed in nearly one hit. Somebody's like 50 life with like 0.2 second reaction time, a tiny white bubble on the ground. The visual clarity and understanding the danger of the events you're facing is not good in Path of Exile 2, and combined with the fact that you almost can't survive anything unless you are looking at everything all the time and utilizing your dodge roll. Like, there are many boss mechanics that if you mistime your dodge roll, you will get one-shotted. And I do want to also mention that I've taken a look at a lot of other people's builds, a lot of content creators are making builds and stuff. The way the game is set up is, if you want to progress, if you want to level, if you want to reach the highest tier maps, you need to make a character that doesn't, like, almost ever die. A lot of the builds that I've seen are people doing like tier 1 and tier 2 maps with like less than 2,000 health, and I'm pretty much going to straight up say it. Some of you guys might not like this, but those guides are not worth anything when it comes to dealing with
This is the point. This is the point. Again, you're watching a load of people having fun, having experiences. They complete the campaign, they do a tier 1, a tier 2 map, and the game sort of feels okay. You can kind of push through. You can kind of overpower the enemies with your power. You can one-shot them. You can clear trash. You can nuke a few bosses, and if the boss hits you, you might just have enough health to survive. You might have enough damage reduction to survive. Once you slightly get out of the tier 1 and 2 maps, you are in trouble. And that is the enjoyment of POE1, is that a variety of builds work. In POE2, a lot of characters are just simply going to be locked out of any sort of high-level content. And then basically you're doing low-level maps, which for all intents and purposes is no different than doing Act 3 of the campaign. You're basically farming the campaign there, except maybe occasionally you might find a breach, but because you're not spec'd into it, it's kind of worthless. And we always talked about POE1 that sometimes it was frustrating because it didn't respect your time. You could spend hours and hours and hours and maybe not even get a full breach run. So they made splinters, then they made double splinter drops, then they made hands that drop splinters, then they gave auto pickup, all this kind of stuff, right, that started to come into the game to help respect your time. POE2 doesn't respect your time. You're not going to get much stronger. If your build is kind of mid leaving the campaign, you may as well give up. And that sounds like, oh, you're just being a negative. It's true. If you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean the game can't change, and it doesn't mean the game isn't good. But when you ask for change, people assume that you're a terrible player, and they assume you want POE1. Does Kripparrian here sound like he wants POE1? No, he's just legitimately saying, listen, most of the builds that you're even looking at are complete trash and won't even work because they haven't even made it to the end game. They don't even know what they're talking about.
With actual high-level maps, because in actual high-level maps, if you have 3,000 health, 5,000 armor, are using active block, are keeping your distance, have damage mitigation, have armor applied to elemental damage, have damage reduction by 20%, have a bunch of minions protecting you from a copious amount of projectiles, you're still going to get nearly one-shotted constantly, repeatedly. Okay, that's the game. So if you see someone is like, oh wow, this build is so good, I'm gonna tell you, you're in for disappointment. I've seen 1,700 life builds. They're just cruising through tier 1 and 2 maps. That's all they're gonna do. Okay,
yeah,
that's all. That's it. You maybe add 5 tiers, and then you start getting one-shotted in every third map. That actually makes the character unplayable at that point. Because
so this is the thing here. I don't think people realize how the end game system works, so I'll let him explain it.
If you die in a map, the map is lost. Effectively, the progression to get to that map tier is lost. You are basically completely screwed. And you're set back because you do lose experience if you die at, I think it's level 70-something plus. You actually lose 15% experience, I believe. It's a lot of experience. So it might mean that you also never level up. Okay, so it is truly ruthless. It is beyond ruthless in that sense. All right, so let's back up a little bit. You're checking out Path of Exile 2 for the first time, and I want to kind of go over things and offer mostly my issues with the game because you've.
So you can see here in the first 8 minutes of the video that, to be honest, he's trying to warn you that this is not POE1. This is nothing like POE1. It's an entirely different game, and it's probably going to have its own fan base. The key thing here is most people that I know that play POE a lot like to chill out, and they like to get a character that feels strong, which means because they've built their character up with good gear, more damage, their brain can be turned off ever so slightly. All of a sudden, they're not quite worried about as much one-shots. They're not quite worried about stepping in the chaos damage because they've spec'd into CI now. They've got a load of energy shield, whatever it may be, right? They've got the tunes on, the grinding for gear. In this game, unless you want to sit down and fully sweat and micro and dodge everything, you will not progress. And doing that league on league on league on league, making new character on new character, and it never feeling any different. If you go and level a bow character, or you go and level a storm character, or you go and level a warrior character, you're still going to be constantly focused and dodging in every single aspect of the game. Your brain will not be allowed to turn off.
You've probably heard enough positivity. I've actually quite enjoyed my playthrough. Overall, I think it's very fun to play Path of Exile 2. I recommend it for you guys to try.
I agree. It is fun.
So
it's fun. I've not been negative. It's just
you're
different.
In the early game. The main thing that I dislike in the early game is gems and balance. I don't like their gem system more than I like Path of Exile 1's gem system, because you can't like farm to get character power. In Path of Exile 1, if you're playing a character that maybe is just not so good in the early game, or maybe it's not so good in the mid game, what you can do is you can stay in a zone a little bit longer, kill a bunch more monsters, your gems will level up, and this will be like over-leveling, and it'll make the content that you're about to do a little bit less challenging. It kind of has this forgiveness, and it allows Path of Exile 1 to have broadly very well-balanced content, because, well, you're not forcing people into like, at this point you have to defeat that, which is a nice concept in general, but if it's too rigid, which in my opinion in Path of Exile 2 it is, because largely of their gem system, it doesn't feel very good.
So the key thing to take away here is you can play weird builds in POE1. You ever played like a stat stacker and you can't be bothered to respec your tree, so you kind of play the build from the get-go and you're just taking int nodes, stat nodes, and your character's weak. But you think to yourself, okay, I am a little bit weak here. I'm going to stay in the dock zone for a little bit longer. I'm going to farm. I'm going to get like 3 or 4 levels on my power siphon. I'm gonna level up and just take a few extra nodes that I probably shouldn't have, but here we go. That's because the tree feels impactful. In POE2, you can agree with me if you've played the game, a character from level 25 to, let's say, even level 35, it's not going to feel that much different. You're not going to suddenly start overpowering enemies or one-shotting or feeling any different, and that's because, one, your support gem has remained the same for 10 levels because, well, you just have no quality on it. It hasn't got any levels. Your skill gem, you might not have found an upgrade for the skill gem because it hasn't been leveling and maybe one hasn't dropped. And the tree nodes that you're going to aren't that impactful. And so there isn't a case where you go, you know what I'm going to do here is I'm going to spec more into life. I'm going to make my character a little bit tankier here, and I'm going to get through this campaign, then I'm going to respec, and I'm going to spec into some damage, or I'm going to change my tree a little bit. In POE2, you kind of locked onto this path from the get-go, and you don't really feel any ramp.
Of Exile 2, if you're facing a boss and the boss is too hard, your options are basically to farm a zone for hours and hours and hours, and you'll get like 2%, maybe 10% character power if you get an item upgrade, because getting like another couple levels, it's not giving you that much power. The passive tree, there's not that much power there. Your gems, you literally can't level them. The way that gems work is the level of a gem drops from a level of a zone. So if you can't beat like a boss in the campaign, you can't increase the level of your gems. The best you can do is match the level of the gems of that zone, which usually, again, doesn't give you that much character power if your main gem is already of that level. So it gets a little bit tricky, because they're kind of setting themselves up for a real challenge in finding some sort of balance to this, because not every class is going to be pretty balanced in every single stage of the game, especially the early game. In my opinion, Path of Exile 1's gem system is amazing. I think it's the best skill system in an ARPG. I think it's a 10 out of 10 in terms of mechanics. It can look a little bit daunting, but in Path of Exile 2, it is a little bit more polished of a system. It looks a little bit less daunting, but it's actually not, because the core mechanics and the scaling and the optimal setups are still going to be like Giga Theory crafted. It's not really any simpler in that sense. It might be a little bit simpler for the player that doesn't want to look literally anything up and just wants to dive into the game. I don't know how many players like that there are these days. Maybe there's quite a few, maybe there's not. I don't know. Maybe that's something that they're keeping in mind. But overall, the core idea that you can't get power from gems is really kind of weak, in my opinion. And I also think that it's really lame that it's trivialized with trading. So if you're playing in a trading environment, you do trivialize everything. You literally trivialize everything. You can be like, oh, well, all these other players that have been playing the game like crazy, I can just buy a max level gem from them. Because, my character, I've been doing like some of the highest tier maps. I have like 30 gems that are like level 18 or something. I have like so many. They're worthless to me, right? So like someone who's playing behind me, just like, Krip, I want to buy one of your level 18 gems. They literally missed out an enormous amount of progression. And this problem really does start in their gem system, and you feel this problem right away in the early parts of the campaign. For me, Act 2 was the hardest part of the game.
So, the interesting thing here is I hope people are picking up on what he's saying. It's not so much that you're just trading for power, because we've always been able to do that. But in POE2, it is such a slog, and you're not going to find much good gear. You're not going to find power through farming and getting quality on gems and flipping gems. That the only way you really are going to get power is you either make it to like very, very high level and fill out your passive tree and get really good gear through slowly grinding, or what you're going to do is think, my character sucks here a little bit, it is brutal, I'm going to go ahead and buy some gems and buy a little bit of gear. You bypass that initial hurdle. You're then going to land yourself in the end of campaign tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 maps with kind of fully leveled gems that aren't going to get any stronger. You're not really going to find much gear now, because your gear is, you've bought a little bit of gear. And then the next leap in power is basically end game maps, end game mapping systems that you have to fully invest into. And the problem there is, because you've bought the power and you've gone ahead and arrived at the sort of destination without actually doing the work, you haven't felt that ramp. Now all you're going to feel is the difficulty. This is the key thing to note about this entire review. You're going to just feel the difficulty. There will be no more ramp. There won't be any more gems leveling up or power coming through the tree. You might only level up 3 or 4 more times because you're not getting any XP. So all of a sudden, you finish the campaign. It was too difficult, so you bought some gems. Now you realize that hasn't actually made that much of a difference. I'm now in the end game. I'm going to be thumped and walloped over and over and over again, and I'm also not getting any stronger. You're only going to experience the frustration. So I think players are going to play their class, go through the campaign, have some fun, and then they're going to only feel frustration. And I don't think a lot of people have got there yet, but when they do, in a week or 2 or 3 weeks, I think there's going to be a big shift in how we think about this game.
Out of the campaign, of the entire game, the hardest part was Act 2. Why?
By the way, if a random player was to go on Reddit and say the hardest act, what's harder, tier 13 maps or Act 2, and they were to say Act 2 is so much more difficult, they would be ridiculed. This is why I like watching people that are like vetted and experienced in the game, because they're actually allowed to say what they think without the immediate backlash. People actually think about their words rather than just judging who they are. And yeah, he says Act 2 was the most difficult. If a random person was to say that, it would be like, bro, you just suck, get good.
Because I didn't get any skill gems. They're pretty rare in the campaign. I just didn't get one. I went from a level 6 Raging Spirits to a level 10 at the start of Act 3. And in Act 2, I had 0 gem upgrades for my main source of damage. It was actually awful. And yeah, that doesn't feel good, right? It's like nothing. There's nothing I could do in terms of character power other than mindlessly grind the same zone and hope that I get a gem drop. But the buff gems, the spirit cost gems, are just like really, really rare. So yeah, I just didn't get one. A lot of people played the build guide. Glad you guys enjoyed it. And it's like, yeah, no problems, Krip. Build's great. Thank you. It's like, yeah, but if you get unlucky with gems, it's not going to feel super great. In the mid game, you're going to start to do ascendancies. The ascendancy system is kind of frustrating. Basically, ascendancies are not free like they are in Path of Exile 1.
By the way, gamers, when you go to do Ascendancy 3 and 4, I want you to complete Ascendancy 3 and 4 and then come back and tell me that it's a skill issue or that you just want the game to be POE 1. Trust me, when you try Ascendancy 3 and 4, you're not going to have a fun time, and it's not even going to feel impactful.
Getting your first ascendancy point is pretty easy. Getting your second one, you have to do like an ultimatum. An ultimatum is insane RNG. You can do the same ultimatum, and it can be unbelievably easy. It's like just clearing white trash mobs.
I re-rolled mine. When I eventually did my ultimatum, I had no difficulty mods on it, and I breezed through it. The first 2 times I had like fizzes, extra chaos, no regen, it was impossible. I couldn't do it. So having layers of RNG, either in a sanctum, even in the sanctum, when there's that pool, it says fill the pool of monsters by killing the rare monsters. The rare monsters, you might get some easy ones, or you might get some insanely difficult ones. They should be set. Ascendancy things to ascend should be set. The rares in there should be set so they can be balanced accordingly. The layout should be set. Stuff like this. This layers of RNG is nonsense, because somebody might get through Ascendancy 3 by just having total luck and been like, oh, that wasn't that bad, I guess my character's ready. Or somebody might still be stuck on Ascendancy 2 because they are getting screwed by RNG on the ultimatums.
Or it can be borderline impossible for the build that you're currently playing. I don't think this is a very good system. I like the idea behind it, but generally it feels that at least the first 3 ascendancy groups should be a little bit more free, so people could actually kind of take in the class that they're meaning to play. I don't feel you should have to go that hard for it. It's also Sanctum, Forced. I played in Ruthless, and let me tell you something about Sanctum and Ruthless. With absolutely 0 movement skills or teleports, Sanctum is not all that fun. A lot of people have been seriously spoiled with Flame Dash to levels that you can't imagine anymore until you hit up some of the Sanctums. I had to do a 4-floor Sanctum for the 4th Ascendancy major node. Those are crazy. Also in the mid game, you're going to start to see balance start to come in. You're going to start to see one-shots. It's not really easy. I was going to say not possible, but it's kind of possible. It's not really easy to significantly increase your survivability. It's going to be a case where you can't really cap a lot of your resists while you're doing the campaign, but if you're lucky, maybe you'll be able to. But you'll still reach that point where you just can't do a whole lot about it. You can't gain that much survivability from the passive skill tree because there's only 2% life nodes. They're 3%, so they're hardly even worth it. It's almost worth to just get strength on the skill tree everywhere. So because you can't actually make your character more meaningfully tanky, the bosses are literally starting to just one-shot you. And it's going to be a case where, again, you either time your dodge roll properly or you die. And this notion starts around the mid-game in the campaign and continues for the rest of the game for most builds. In the end game, and generally for end game, I'm talking about at least mid-tier maps to end game maps, because the early game maps are actually really easy. You can just dive into the early game maps like they're absolutely nothing. There really isn't that much to them. If you're doing a tier 1 map, it's a snooze fest for the Necro Infernalist. But yes, as you go into tier 6, tier 10 maps, it starts to get pretty serious. The endgame is entirely balanced around avoiding one-shots with dodge, pretty much. You're going to see some streamers who are just ridiculously good at the game, at micromanaging the distance between them and the mobs, and they're going to play builds that are barely over 2k health in the highest tier maps. And I'm going to tell you that you are not going to enjoy that experience, speaking to 99.9% of you. You basically need 3,000 health and armor and ridiculous defenses to not get repeatedly one-shot, and you'll still get one-shot if you don't dodge at the right times, especially on bosses and things. Maps are generally too big. This is something that has been talked about. It's, I'm not the first one to bring this to the table. It's just a real slog to go through some of these maps. Some maps are okay, some maps just feel really big. The visual clarity is very poor. There's some maps where you have to go down like a like a wood bridge or something, and there's like trees in front of it. You literally can't see your character. And I know it's like strategy, maybe you don't go on there, but like, bro, what are you gonna do? Go all the way around the map? You're gonna do that to avoid.
I think that's like I won't play the whole review because we'll be here all day, but I think there's a lot to take in there. And I think that's what people are currently saying. Like you see there, like, oh, there's a big rare that's blocking the bridge and it's gonna one shot me. And people are like, well, just be tactical. This isn't POE1. Engage your brain, go all the way around the map, use your spells, kite him away. Yeah, okay, we can do that, but ultimately, it's actually not very fun. And most people play video games for fun. Fun can be challenging. You can be challenged and have fun, but the challenge has to be in the right way. The challenge shouldn't be, I'm going through a map. I don't know if any of you have even got to maps yet, but there are a lot of maps where literally you can't see your own character because of the foliage and the way like the top-down angle works. And you have these exploding guys. You have rares like that basically, like, there are rares that aren't very easily identifiable. I've got this thing where I call them, so I've lightning warp call them to get my mana and life back. You can just land on one that just has an AoE on death effect that instantaneously blows you up, and then your map's gone, and all of your loot's gone, and your XP's gone. And then, yeah, I mean, he goes on for a while to obviously say that he enjoys the game, but the blind positivity I think it's totally overkill, to be honest. I think it's an enjoyable game and it's got a little bit of promise, but there are major issues with the game, and it's almost like if you voice them, it's like, oh, you just want to POE1 zoomer, you just want to fly around the map at light speed. No, I actually like the challenge, but the challenge has to be like challenging in the right area. Like, if I'm going into a tier 13 map boss, maybe it's a case of like, hey, if you want to progress to tier 14 maps, you need to kill this tier 13 map boss. Then you might have to learn the mechanics and do it in one go. But constantly having to do mechanics every single map to dodge poison darts being thrown at you, have to roll under them. It's too much, and I don't think people will like it as much as they think they're going to like it. Having, you can experience it once. The first time you roll under a poison dart, you're like, oh shit, that's pretty cool, I can dodge that. Then you realize you have to dodge it, and then all of a sudden it is just constantly sweaty, constantly over the top, knowing as well, not just knowing like I could die and lose my loot that's on the floor, knowing if I die I'm going to lose a tremendous amount of time and XP and progress. It's like he says, POE2 is ruthless.